You can kill me, but how will you kill my thoughts? Staring into the eyes of death in the final moments of his life, he kept screaming these words, knowing that even if he fell silent forever that day, the ideology he had ignited would never die. At 40 years old, this man left his mark on the pages of history and sparked a revolutionary movement that remained alive even 50 years after his death. At the age of 15, when his college asked him to attend a political rally, he sarcastically responded that he should go so the police could chase him away with their batons and tear gas. He said, "If you want to send me to a rally, then give me a gun." Though unarmed, he risked his life to free his country from the grip of America's puppet government. He risked his life not only for Cuba, but also fought in the independence struggles of several other nations. However, today some see him as a hero, while others remember him as a stubborn revolutionary who only knew how to stand by his beliefs. And then, there are some countries where Che Guevara is regarded as a terrorist. Labeled as a terrorist by some, he could have quickly taken control of the CIA and ruled alongside Fidel Castro for the rest of his life. However, his mission was never limited to the freedom of just one nation. He sought to eradicate capitalism from the world. He was a rebel whose only aim was to keep the revolution alive. Capitalist countries like the United States called him a terrorist, while communist nations called him a revolutionary. But the truth is that a human being's character is never completely white or black, so in such a situation, it would not bind him in one definition. After all, who was Che Guevara, and why, even after 50 years of his death, has history not forgotten him? Why is Che Guevara still considered the poster boy of revolutions? He was not always known as Che Guevara. His real name was Ernesto Rafael Guevara, given to him at birth. Born on June 14, 1928, in Rosario, Argentina, he was the son of Ernesto Guevara Lynch and Celia de la Serna y Llosa. He was the eldest of 5 children. His family was middle class, so he never faced financial hardship. Although he was born in Argentina, his ancestors were from Ireland. Growing up, he heard countless stories about Ireland from his grandmother. He read so much about Ireland that even though he had never been there, he was well informed about even the most minor events happening in the country. From an early age, he was passionate about reading and devoured every book in his home. His house had a library of 3,000 books, where he spent most of his time. Along with reading, he was also interested in scientific experiments. He even set up a small laboratory in his garage, where he conducted various chemical experiments. Che had asthma since childhood, yet his love for reading remained undeterred. Despite his health issues, he was an excellent athlete, a skilled swimmer, football player, shooter, cyclist, and national-level track competitor. By 12, he had even learned to play chess from his father. He developed a deep interest in poetry and politics from a young age. He read works by Pablo Neruda, John Keats, Karl Marx, William Faulkner, Lenin, and many other influential figures. His vast knowledge made him a formidable intellectual force. Due to his deep curiosity and intellect, Che was regarded as a scholar. In 1948, he enrolled at the University of Buenos Aires to study medicine. It was here that he first dreamed of exploring the world. Alongside his studies, he embarked on 2 significant journeys that completely changed his worldview. His first journey took him across northern Argentina and nearby provinces. He traveled 30,000 kilometers on a bicycle, fitted with a small engine, completing the journey alone. After this expedition, he worked as a medical assistant in Argentina. However, after a few years, he set out on a second, even more life-changing journey. This journey became the most significant turning point in his life. In 1952, He embarked on an 8,000-mile motorcycle trip across Latin America with his friend, Alberto Granado. This experience transformed his thinking forever. As he traveled through different countries, cities, and villages, he witnessed many realities of life. However, the one thing that left a lasting impact on him was the suffering of the poor, the peasants, and the working class. He saw people working for hours under the scorching sun for just a few bucks, and still without a blanket. He saw children and older adults starving on the streets. He witnessed how, due to capitalism, the rich were becoming richer while the poor were becoming poorer. Throughout the journey, Che kept a diary, documenting his experiences and the date and time of each place he visited. Later, Chan's experiences were published in the Motorcycle Diaries, which eventually became a New York Times bestseller. In 2004, a film of the same name was released, portraying Chan's motorcycle journey. Chan then became active in politics and revolution. His journey transformed him so much that, despite coming from a wealthy family, he dedicated his entire life to working for the oppressed. During this motorcycle journey, Chan saw people suffering in poverty and misery in a Latin American country. He returned with a new identity, Che Guevara, and a new ideology. This time, Guevara, who returned, was determined to fight against capitalism. He began his revolutionary activities in Guatemala in 1953. At that time, Jacobo Arbenz was the president of this region, striving to address social and economic inequalities. However, the United States, which supported capitalism, was displeased with this social revolution. As a result, the US decided to dismantle the Arbenz government in Guatemala, and within a few years, this plan was executed. With the help of the CIA, the US forced Arbenz to resign and deployed its military in Guatemala. The CIA closely monitored America's actions and was angered by the coup in Guatemala. Realizing that every progressive leftist in America would resist this government in the future, the CIA began planning a global revolution, starting in Guatemala. To challenge US dominance, the CIA allied with several rebel groups who were enraged by the ousting of the Arbenz government. However, lacking strong support at the time, the CIA was eventually forced to withdraw from Guatemala. Interestingly, Guatemala was a place that Che Guevara had long wished to visit. He adopted this name after the failure of the Guatemala Revolution. In 1954, he decided to move to Mexico City, where he started working as a doctor in the allergy department of a general hospital. But fate had other plans. Before long, he met the Cuban revolutionary brothers, Fidel and Raul Castro, who were working to overthrow America's puppet government in Cuba. At that time, Cuba was under the rule of the military dictator Fulgencio Batista, who was a puppet of the US. The Cuban government, funded by the US, maintained American control. Batista's regime was solely focused on pleasing the US, while poverty, misery, and corruption spread across Cuba. Amidst this chaos, Fidel Castro emerged as a leader against American capitalism, leading a revolution across Cuba. Gradually, Cuba's middle class rallied behind him. He had been trying to establish a revolutionary movement for years, but failed. Then, in June 1955, Fidel met Che Guevara in Mexico City. The two became close allies, united in their mission to overthrow Cuba's dictatorship. Soon after, Fidel initiated an armed uprising. He was so impressed by Che Guevara's ideology and revolutionary spirit that, without hesitation, he made Che a key member of the July 26 movement. Under this movement, Fidel Castro, his brother Raul, and 82 armed revolutionaries trained in guerrilla warfare to overthrow Batista's government. Che and Fidel personally led this training, During the movement, they focused on combat medicine and guerrilla warfare tactics, including hit-and-run strategies. After rigorous training, Castro and Guevara attempted to infiltrate Cuba in secrecy. They landed in Cuba in an old, leaky cabin cruiser named Grandma. However, before they could establish a base, Batista's government was alerted to their arrival and launched a brutal attack, temporarily crushing the July 26 movement. Against such a powerful army, Che and Castro's 82 revolutionaries stood little chance. Almost all of them were killed, and Che was among the injured survivors who fled and took refuge in the Sierra Maestra Mountains. Now Che and Fidel had only one option left: to arm the people and violently overthrow the government. Even after the failure of the July 26 movement, Che and Castro did not give up. This time, they began building a more potent force in the Sierra Maestra Mountains. Their preparations were more thorough, and their supporters more numerous than before. The local people, inspired by the revolutionary ideals of Che and Castro, provided them with full support. During his time in Sierra Maestra, Che noticed that the region lacked necessities: no children's schools, electricity, and healthcare facilities. Additionally, over 40% of adults in the area were illiterate. Alongside preparing for war, Che took it upon himself to establish grenade-making factories. To address food shortages, he worked with the local communities. Apart from military efforts, Che also opened schools. As a doctor, he also focused on healthcare, establishing local clinics. He even facilitated the distribution of newspapers in Sierra Maestra, ensuring that people remained informed about global events despite their isolation. These efforts made Che a revered figure among the people. The locals started seeing him as their savior. However, this period also revealed another side of Che. When he and his forces took control of territories, he began suppressing his opponents with brutal force. Whenever he suspected someone of disloyalty, he would have them executed, often without concrete evidence. Che firmly believed in discipline and communism, and anyone who failed to follow his ideology or did not show enough dedication to training and education was eliminated without hesitation. After years of preparation, Castro and Che gained victories against Batista's government. Living in the mountains, they honed their guerrilla warfare tactics so that even the Air Force could not defeat them. Che and Castro gained momentum, forcing Batista's government into retreat. The United States had been supporting Batista's regime as part of its broader strategy to maintain control over Cuba through a puppet government. As Che and Castro continued to outmaneuver Batista's forces, their popularity among the Cuban people grew. More and more locals joined them, and soon, their revolutionary force had swelled to around 800 members. By January 1st, 1959, Castro and his fighters directly confronted Batista's military and secured a decisive victory. With Castro's triumph in Cuba, the United States withdrew its support, and Cuba finally came under revolutionary rule. Che played a crucial role in this victory. After forming the new government, Castro declared himself Prime Minister of Cuba and appointed Che his second-in-command. Che was entrusted with significant responsibilities, as Castro had immense faith in his ability to shape Cuba's future. However, as the new government took control, efforts to eliminate opposition intensified. Upon entering Havana on January 1st, 1959, Che was made the commander of the Cuban front. Anyone who opposed the new government faced execution, imprisonment, or brutal punishments. Many were sentenced to rot in Cuban prisons, while others were tortured or left to die from starvation and disease. Over time, Che was given even greater responsibilities. He was appointed chief of the industrial department. National Bank of Cuba president, and later, Minister of Industry. He also served as a Cuban diplomat, representing the country on international platforms and advocating for anti-capitalist policies worldwide. On multiple occasions, he openly criticized the United States' foreign policies. Like Castro, he prioritized communist ideals above all else. Che believed that a genuinely ideal citizen must fully embrace communist ideology and reject capitalist influences. According to his views, those who failed to conform to communism had no right to live in Cuba. In 1960, Cuba established its first labor camps, where individuals were sent to be re-educated into the ideal communist citizen. It was believed that through hard labor, people could be transformed. Many Afro-Cuban priests and other dissenters were forced into these camps, subjected to grueling conditions to break their anti-communist beliefs. During his tenure, Che implemented several reforms, the most famous of which was agrarian reform. He nationalized American-owned industries in Cuba, confiscated their lands, and eliminated privatization. The Cuban economy became entirely state-controlled. Just as he had focused on literacy in Sierra Maestra, Che made education a central government priority. His efforts dramatically increased literacy rates, from around 60% in 1959 to 96% by 1969. When Che was appointed Minister of Finance and President of the National Bank, his main goal was to establish social and economic equality. He strongly opposed corruption and discrimination. His commitment to his ideals was so strong that he even prohibited his wife from benefiting from government privileges. He never used government resources for personal gain and remained dedicated to promoting unity and equality among the people. During this period, Che also began delivering public speeches and writing articles. Some of his most notable works include Man and Socialism in the World and Guerrilla Warfare, 1961. As tensions with the United States escalated, Cuba strengthened its ties with the Soviet Union. Their relationship extended beyond trade, as both shared similar governance styles based on communist ideology. However, the Soviet Union's support for Cuba was not purely ideological. It was also a strategic move to challenge U.S. influence. This was the height of the Cold War, and both superpowers sought to undermine each other. The USSR understood that America would not tolerate a communist stronghold so close to its borders. It would be like someone speaking the language of the Soviet Union right under America's nose. However, something similar happened. The United States started hating the relationship between the USSR and Cuba so much that they first banned all American companies from operating in Cuba. The American people also lost interest in maintaining friendly relations with the Cubans. The Cubans, on the other hand, had made it their mission to eradicate capitalism from their country. Frustrated by Cuba's shifting allegiance, the U.S. severed all diplomatic ties and began conspiring against the Cuban government. To execute their plan, they trained a group of exiled Cubans in the U.S. and armed them against the Cuban government. However, the Cuban military was so strong that this American conspiracy, known as the Bay of Pigs invasion, failed miserably, and Cuba defeated the US-backed forces. Though Cuba remained unharmed, Fidel Castro and Che Guevara's anger grew significantly. As a result, the Soviet Union offered to install nuclear missiles in Cuba. Both Castro and Guevara accepted the offer, while the USSR wanted to use Cuba as a strategic advantage against the US. The Cubans believed that having Soviet missiles on their land would prevent another American invasion. However, the opposite happened. After the missile installation in Cuba, the world's two superpowers, the USSR and the US, came dangerously close to war. The situation escalated to the point where a Third World War seemed imminent. However, due to diplomatic efforts and a desire to maintain peace, the USSR agreed to remove the nuclear missiles from Cuba, and both nations stepped back from the brink of war. Although Fidel Castro and Che Guevara strongly opposed the missile withdrawal, the USSR forced their hand, leading to a strain in relations between Cuba and the Soviet Union. In December 1964, Che Guevara visited the United Nations General Assembly, where he openly criticized U.S. interference in Cuba's affairs and its surveillance activities. He was particularly angered by America's efforts to control Cuban space. By this time, Guevara was living relatively comfortably in Cuba, but his revolutionary spirit drove him to seek new uprisings in South America. He wanted to replicate the Cuban Revolution elsewhere. After discussions with Castro, he secretly left Cuba to pursue his revolutionary ambitions. For the next 2 years, no one knew of Guevara's whereabouts. Many assumed he was dead, but that was not the case. He was quietly working to ignite a revolution in the Republic of Congo. There, he joined the Simba rebellion alongside the supporters of former Congolese Prime Minister Patrice Lumumba. However, Guevara was shocked by the state of the rebel forces. The anti-government fighters were neither well-trained nor well-equipped. Although Guevara attempted to train them, the efforts failed, forcing him to retreat. His revolutionary campaign in the Congo was a complete failure. After fleeing, Guevara shifted his focus to Bolivia in 1966, where he secretly led a guerrilla group in the Santa Cruz region. Initially, the group saw some success, but the Bolivian army was well trained and heavily supported by the United States. Over time, Guevara and his fighters were forced into constant retreat. However, their game of cat and mouse did not last long. On October 7, 1967, a local informant revealed Guevara's location to the Bolivian army. The next day, October 8, 1967, a force of approximately 1,800 Bolivian soldiers and CIA operatives surrounded and captured him. Despite attempts to save him, Guevara was taken to a local school, where he spent his final night. The following day, Bolivian authorities ordered his execution. A soldier named Mario was given the task of executing Guevara, with explicit instructions not to shoot him in the head. When Mario entered the room, Guevara, fully aware of his fate, calmly stated, "I know you have come to kill me. Shoot, coward. You are only going to kill a man." Mario then fired 9 bullets into Guevara's body, ending his life. To confirm his identity, the Bolivian authorities amputated Guevara's hands and preserved them as proof. Following his death, Castro publicly announced Guevara's passing, and a nationwide mourning took place in Cuba. Guevara's death deeply saddened people. Many found it hard to believe that such a prominent revolutionary had been killed so easily. Years later, in 1997, Guevara's remains and those of his fallen comrades were recovered and brought back to Cuba, where they were given a proper burial with full honors. In 2008, a statue of Che Guevara was erected in his birthplace, Rosario, Argentina, to honor his legacy. Even today, he is remembered as a symbol of revolution and defiance. Throughout his life, he remained committed to his ideals. Unlike many leaders who embraced power and luxury, Guevara chose to fight for his beliefs until his final breath. That's all for today. We hope you enjoyed our video. We will continue bringing you more informative content in the future. Until then, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more exciting history lessons.